to Magical Experiments in the weekly live stream. And tonight, or today, or whenever it is that you're seeing this, we are going to discuss the topic of frictionless results and how to detach yourself from your magical workings once you've done them. So let's start with frictionless results. Let's talk about what I mean by that. So in the last couple weeks, we've been talking a fair amount about low effort magic and basically a common sense approach to magic that many people miss out on because they get really caught up in the ceremonial and ritual stuff to the point that they don't realize that there's a lot more out there. Fair enough. We know that and everything. But when I talk about frictionless results, what I'm talking about is kind of this desired approach to magic where we get results, through the path of least resistance. Now, I read this book called Frictionless Sales, and it was an interesting book because the author essentially made the point that you want to make your sales process as frictionless as possible. You don't want friction when it comes to sales, because when you have friction occurring in sales, it means people aren't going to buy. So, for example, if you're creating classes and you're charging a lot of money, there's going to be friction there. And the reason why there's going to be friction is because people are going to be looking at your copy, trying to determine if what you're offering is going to be worth the amount of money they're going to invest. And whether they realize it or not, in the back of their head, it's also going to be about whether it's worth the time that they're investing. Not just the time in watching the course and taking it, but the time they also spent earning that money to get that course. So how this relates to magic is really comes right down to this. When we talk about frictionless results, we're talking about an approach to magic that essentially says, okay, how can we get our results with as little friction as possible? Because rug burns aside and any fun that might come from that, we really want to focus on the fact that our magic should ideally be allowing us to get results with as little friction as possible. And at the same time, what we necessarily need to understand is that when we're shooting for magic, we can't just go and claim anything as a result. We can't, for example, say that because somebody ate a banana at work and we did a sigil about it, that automatically makes it true. It's simply not the case. That's really not magic. I mean, that's coincidence as far as I'm concerned, because there's no way to prove one way or another that because somebody ate a banana at work that it's magic. When we're looking at magic, I mean, we necessarily must be able to see that whatever occurred at the very least was helped along by our magical work. And when we look at magic, I mean, what we're really looking at here is a fundamental approach where we're using magic to force the hand of fate in our favor. We're taking a possibility and we're turning it into a reality, and we're creating a path of least resistance with as little friction as possible. And this is one of the reasons why I advocate for low effort magic, where when you can take your everyday actions and turn them into double dipping, as it were, where, yeah, you're doing those actions and at the same time there's a magical connection with those actions leading toward getting your result, why not do that? That creates less friction because you're already working something in that direction. You're already doing something toward manifesting your desired result, and you're essentially taking what you would have already been doing otherwise and making it into something that feeds into what you're doing. So we go with this, going back to this concept of frictionless sales and tying it to the frictionless results. With frictionless sales, the idea is this: you make the sales experience as easy as possible. You want to be able to address the questions people have ahead of time. You want to be able to set it up so that when people go to buy your service, your product, your book, your class, whatever else, they have as few questions as possible. And the reason why they have as few questions as possible is because you've either addressed their objections or you've set the bar so low there's no reason for them to really think about it. Case in point, if you look at my strategy with why with the way that I price classes, my classes are purposely set at a relatively reasonable price. Part of it's because of the pandemic, but even after the pandemic goes, I'm not going to change the price on those classes. So if you go to my class thing and you choose to buy a course for $20, $30, or $40 at the most, maybe the $40 one, you're going to think about it for a few moments. You're probably not going to think about it that much when it comes to the 20 and 30, and the reason why is because I don't want you to have to think about it. You either want the class or you don't. If you're having to think, well, geez, I got to spend money on this, then I've created friction there for you. But if you're, on the other hand, you're like, you know what, that's reasonable, I want the class, I'm going to go ahead and buy it, then there you go. I've created a frictionless experience, or at least a relatively frictionless experience. With your results, tying this back to magic, it's the same thing. You're doing magical work in order to get a result. You want that magical work to be as frictionless as possible. You want to have as little resistance there as possible. And the way you go about doing that is you look at the overall equation and you're saying, okay, what is it that I want to manifest? And maybe what you want to manifest is something that's a big deal. Then you have to look at it in terms of timing and space. Like if you want it now, you're going to have more resistance, because the fact of the matter is you have more to overcome in order to get where you want to go. If, on the other hand, you want it, but you know that you can allow to manifest a little bit further down the line, then you're already reducing the amount of resistance you're facing because you're factoring time into what you're going for. If you're smart and you're doing work with your identity, and specifically you're doing it in such a way where you're doing the necessary internal work and everything else to make sure that your identity lines up with the desired result, then you're cutting down on the amount of friction that you're going to experience as well. You're cutting down on the amount of resistance. And if you're taking a look at your magical work, and you're doing a ritual, fair enough, I have no problem with that. I mean, I did a ritual yesterday myself, but you're doing a ritual, but at the same time, you're tying everything else into that ritual. You're looking at your mundane actions. You're looking at all the different factors, and you're smashing all that into your working in order to make things as easy as possible. Then you're going to create more of an experience where there is less and less friction. The less resistance you have to overcome, the easier it is for you to get a result. It's as simple as that. And let me be very clear here. This doesn't just apply to low end results, like, okay, something simple. It can be something as complex as getting a car, or manifesting, a house, or setting up your lifestyle by design, or other things along those lines. You just have to think these things out. You have to be strategic about your magical work and not just tactic based. And most people are tactic based. And here's what I mean by that. A strategic approach to magic looks at the overall picture. And it says, okay, how does this fit into my life purpose, etc., etc., and how do I get from point A to point C? And it doesn't just look at it from a tactical, I need this result now. Because anyone can do tactics. I mean, a tactic is basically, I'm going to use sigils, or I'm going to create an entity, or I'm going to do a working with Demon X and come up with a pact, and Demon X will go and do this and that for me. Doesn't really mean much in the sense that it's a tactic. It's going to get you there. But where does it fit in the overall strategy of what you're trying to accomplish? How are you going to get there in the long term? And how does it fit into everything else? So when I talk about a strategic approach, this actually lends itself toward a frictionless result, because with strategy, you're looking at the overall picture of your life, and you're figuring out where this magical working fits into things. And then what you're doing, you're picking your appropriate tactics, but again, you're tying it into the strategy of how is my identity going to change? How am I going to reduce the resistance toward accomplishing this? How am I going to do the necessary prep work so that when this goes off, it just happens like that? And this is really what I mean sometimes too when I talk about doing like the background work. You know, a lot of people with magic, they want their results now, right? They want it now, and they get so caught up in that, and really they get caught up in a Hollywood version of magic, right? Because if you watch TV shows or whatever else, magic seems to happen instantaneously. It's just, of course, it happens because it's special effects, but hey, boom, there you go. What people don't realize is that in reality, even with those special effects, if you were to go on to the TV or movie set, you would see there was a lot of work done ahead of time to make things look effortless. It's the same thing with real magic. When we do real magic, we are essentially setting up our circumstances and everything else and putting everything together in order to make that result manifest as effortlessly as possible. But there's always going to be some effort. That's just the truth. And you have to wrap your head around that and accept it. Because anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Like, as an example, the ritual I did yesterday, I'm trying out a new sigil technique. First thing that was involved was first figuring out what I really wanted with these sigils. You know, what was my end goal, and where did the sigils fit into this? And in the case of this work, and just to give you a bit of context, you know, the sigils basically represent specific variables and or steps that need to occur in order to get the desired end result. Created the sigils on a piece of paper. Then I took a pair of scissors and I cut the sigils free from the paper, and I started randomly moving them around and basically realigning them, doing a little bit of space-time magic, if you will, because what I was doing is resequencing the sigils. And once I got them into the correct sequence that I wanted, put them all together, put them on a wax plate, and just left them there to charge. And then I went and I did my thing for a while, and then I did the sphere of artwork, and used the sphere of art to create my magical space and everything else. And we'll come back to that in a little bit, because we're going to tie this into what I was talking about by effort. And then I take my lighter and I light those suckers up, burn them in my urn until they're ash. And then I leave them there. And you know, I've done my sphere of art working. I've done that particular thing. And I go and I do my qigong work. And I tie the qigong work, you know, the raising the chi and everything else, into those ashes now to help fire it off. And then finally, take the urn outside and go out past the boundary of my driveway, and I toss the ashes onto the ground, and I've let it go. I've let it all go. It's going out into the universe. It's going to do its thing, and this will tie into what I'm talking about with the detachment thing in a few moments. We'll get to that. And go back inside. It's done. Was there effort involved? Yes, there was. There was effort involved in the sense that first I had to think up what I really wanted, and I had to think up all the variables and everything else that needed to be aligned and put into place. Then I had to draw the sigils. Then I had to cut them. Then I left them to charge. Still some effort there going on. Then I went and I did my sphere of artwork to create my sealed magical space that I was going to work in. Then I fired those suckers up. Then I put key into them. Then I walked them out afterwards and tossed them. So you better believe there was a lot of effort involved. But all of this was done to reduce the friction, to reduce the resistance, so that what I want gets manifested that much faster because there's less there getting in the way. And that's not even including all the stuff that was going into the sigils themselves, but you get the idea. Now let's talk about the sphere of artwork, since we're on this topic of friction and results, and I've had some people ask about it anyway. The sphere of art is working. I started learning from my mentor, R.J. Stewart, wonderful guy, and I memorized all the chants, and then I came up with a few chants of my own. And I did this over the course of a year, okay? So I spent a year just simply learning the words and memorizing them. Now, I can guarantee you a lot of people in this day and age of wanting things quick will not put that amount of effort into something, because that's a lot of work. I read the books and I literally memorized the words for the chants. I would say them aloud to myself each day when I was driving home. I would say them in my mind when I was going swimming, etc., etc. All that effort just to memorize the chants. That wasn't even really doing the work, the main work in and of itself. That was just doing the preparatory work. But now I can spout those chants off like nothing. There's no resistance there. It's embodied and embedded within me. And this is what people don't understand about magic a lot of times. They want things quick and easy, when what they don't realize is that you necessarily need to embody and embed magic within yourself. You need to make it part of you. By memorizing those chants, I made it part of my physical identity, not just part of my spiritual identity, but part of my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual identity. I made it all of who I am. Okay? And then what I did is I started doing the actual ritual. I started mediating the forces. And this involves, first aligning yourself to the directions: sky above, ground below, and to the directions east, south, west, north, and to the center, above you or behind you, before you, to your right and your left, and to the center where you reside. By the way, can you tell that I'm actually doing the chant? That's how effortless that is overall. It's just easy. It comes to me. I don't have to think about it. It just is. So this is another thing of reducing that friction. If I don't have to think about it, if I can just step into it and become it, then it's much more powerful than if I have to actually think about it. I want you to keep that in mind when you're looking at your own magical work. Magic requires discipline and focus. It's not just scrawling a sigil and doing something. It is actual focus and work. You have to embody and embed it. And this is what so much of Western magic in particular has forgotten. We're all up here. We're all cerebral. Well, if we're all up here, then we're missing out on here and everything else. We need to embody and embed it. We need to make it an experience, something that speaks to and through us and becomes the reality that we become part of. So anyway, sphere of art. I start doing these chants. I walk in each direction. I say the chants there. Then I call upon the archangels. I'm invoking the elemental, and I'm invoking the archangel for the stellar cosmos and the underworld, and of course the one that wraps it all together, Savuvial. And all of this is done. And then after that, I start doing the chants to the courts and everything else. And this seems like a lot of work. This is 20 minutes for me now. But I can guarantee you that it took longer than that initially. And I can pull that energy up like that now and mediate it. I don't have to even think about it. Whereas before, when I was doing it, I would have to think about it. The first year that I actually did it was just focused on learning how to mediate those energies. Then came working with the alchemical materials and everything else. Why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm telling you all this because I want you to understand a specific context to this. When you want to pull magic off effortlessly, you have to recognize there is effort going in. The people who seem to pull it off effortlessly are the people who have done a fuck ton of work around this stuff. They have put that effort in. They have earned where they're at. And it comes together for them because they've put things together in such a way that it just absolutely pulls everything else together, and boom, things come and they manifest. and it's amazing and it's beautiful, but it does require some effort. But here's the thing, the more you do it and the better you get at it, the more you create that frictionless experience. Like I said, I can do the Sphere of Art now in 20 minutes, do the full ritual as far as everything that goes, and then go and do my meditation and so on and so forth. Right now, I'm learning Qigong exercises, and I can tell you that from a month ago to now, what I the a month ago I was much rougher at the exercises I was learning compared to a month of daily practice doing things again and again and again and again. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. This is why, at least for me, magic is a daily practice. There is daily work, and it's not always that I'm doing sigils every day or whatever else. But I can tell you that when I go and I do sigils or create entities or do any of that other stuff, it comes together very easily because I'm already doing all this other work, and so all of that lends itself to it. And here's a little trick for you too, and something that I do when I do my daily work. I actually have paintings in my ritual room. You're seeing some of them on the back wall here. A couple of them, in this case, are for the Sphere of Art. And what I do is when I do my Sphere of Art every single day, that energy goes into the painting and it's stored there and it's stacked on top of the other things, the other Sphere of Art. So every single time I've done that Sphere of Art work is connected into that painting. And so it stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. And what ends up happening is it allows you to pull on all of those previous experiences. And this, again, is another case where magicians don't think this out all the time. They'll do a ritual once. Okay, great, I did the ritual once. They'll go and they'll do it the next day, and they don't think of tapping in to the experience of what they did before. But you can do this with every single working. Any working that you do, you can tap into the experience of what you did before. Now, I don't recommend it when, let's say, you're doing sigils for different purposes. Like I'm doing a sigil here, or I'm doing a sigil there, right? You could tap into the experience of doing the sigil, but you don't want to tap into what you were actually trying to get the sigil for, because that's going to muddy up the waters. So you have to create specific filters in certain cases. But in the case of the Sphere of Artwork, what I'm doing is I'm doing that work every single day, and I'm building off of it. And yes, there are different things that I'm doing. Like I worked with for 10 months, I did 1 month each month. I was working with a different Sephiroth. Right now I'm working with Supernals. So there is a different focus to that work, but I can still take the basic overall ritual and build off of that and stack it off of what I'm doing, and it's going to be much more powerful as a result. So, these are things you're not going to find in most books on magic, okay? That's just the truth. Most people don't think this way. They don't write this way. They don't approach magic this way. But I do. So lucky you guys. So, now we get to the question of banishing or detaching. And here's what I'm going to say about banishing. Forget banishing, okay? A lot of people will say, oh, I got to banish after I do my magical working. Why would you banish after doing your magical working? I don't banish the Sphere of Art after I do it. I didn't banish my sigils after I did them yesterday. I'm not going to banish the magical entity that I'm creating tomorrow to go hand in hand with the book that I've just about wrapped up on creating magical entities. I'm not going to banish that tomorrow. Why would I do that? If I banish it, I am erasing what I just did. A lot of people think they need to banish, and this is really something that's come about more because of 19th century occultism. Okay, this whole banishment thing, and the 20th century, and it's useful in some ways. Like people say, banish with laughter. The whole chaos magic thing, but I don't banish the way most people do. I don't do most things the way most people do. Okay, let's just be honest here. I just don't. But the whole banishment thing, I don't do that. What I do is I detach from what I'm doing. Because if I were to banish, for example, like some of the stuff that I do, like I have a bunch of sigil paintings. I don't go and I don't burn my paintings after I create them, okay? When I put that much effort into creating a painting, I'm not going to burn it afterwards. Most people say, well, you're attached to your painting. Well, maybe kind of. I do like them. They're aesthetic and pleasing to my eye, at least. I don't care if anyone else likes them or not. Um, but the fact of the matter is, I'm going to banish through detachment. I'm going to let that sigil painting become part of my background. And it's going to always be there. And I'm going to forget about it because it's always there. Now, yesterday I did the sigils and I burned them and I tossed the ashes, and that was my way of forgetting about it. I didn't banish them, though. I just went and I tossed the ashes and I let them go, and they're going out and manifesting into the world, and there it is. The whole point is, though, is you let go. You don't get rid of. That's what banishing is. Banishing is about getting rid of. You let go. You relax. And if you find yourself thinking about it or having emotions about it, what you do is you tie those into that working, so that if a thought starts occurring, it gets boom, it gets put right into the magical working retroactively. Have an emotion come up, boom, it gets put into the magical working retroactively. So even when I've had situations come up where I started thinking about this or that or whatever else, it all gets redirected automatically. And the reason I do that redirection is that way the resistance that would have been coming up because I was thinking or feeling about it or whatever automatically gets turned around and turned into something that works for me, because I want it to work for me. I don't want it to work against me. And so what we must necessarily do with our magic is we need to learn to look at what we're doing differently. And instead of just going with the conventional answers, we ask ourselves, how can we do it better? How can we experiment? This is the core of what magical experimentation is about, and it is what many people ignore to their own peril. Oh, I learned how to banish. That's what I got to do. Ask yourself, why do you have to banish? Who is telling you that? What's the agenda there? Maybe they don't really want your magic to work all that well. Maybe. Maybe they just didn't know what they were doing. Instead of banishing, let go. Relax. And if stuff starts coming up, redirect. Make it part of your background. Make it to the point that you don't even think about it. It's just there. It's just in your background. And you're embodying it because it's going into you all the time. If you were to come into my ritual space and you were to look at all the art in here, all the magical art, it's literally permeating me with the specific energies that I've worked with and everything else. And it does that every single day, 24/7. And the benefit of that is that it gives me that much more oomph in my magical work. Because the fact of the matter is, I have created this magical space that is consistently and constantly working through me. And I have embodied it and embedded it and made it into an experience that is lived instead of just something that's talked about. Are you living your magic? Are you making it part of yourself? Are you making it into yourself to such a point that you don't have to put effort into it? And yes, folks, at the beginning you will have to put effort into it. That's just the reality of it. But if you're doing it smart, you're doing it to the point where that effort becomes easier and easier and easier until it gets to the point that, as I said, I can do the sphere of art in 20 minutes flat. Boom, and it's done. Sphere of art created for another day. And then the next day, do it again. And it's building off of what I did before because I've already put that working in. I keep doing it again and again and again. And that is how you get frictionless results, because the results come a lot easier then. Because you've already figured out how to invest the effort in such a way that every single time you do something, you're building off of what you've already done. Now, I've practiced magic for, let's see, I'm 43 now. I started practicing when I was 16. So 28 years of my life, okay? I'm dating myself here. Oh, no. Anyway, you think about that. The first 10 years of my magical practice, I did what most people do. I treated each magical working as a magical working in and of itself. I didn't think about it strategically. I thought about it tactically. And then, 10 years into it, I woke up one day, I had this realization that, I was going to end up screwing my life up somehow or another. And I started doing internal work. And when I did internal work, that's when I started applying a strategic approach. And I began asking myself, how can I take all this work that I'm doing and build off of it? And make it into something where the more often I do it, the more powerful it gets, and the easier it gets for me to get what I want. Well, you don't look at Elizabeth, from what I can tell. So, I mean, you look beautiful, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, the point being, you build all this stuff off, and you keep going, and it just becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, and it just becomes something that will come together. That's how you want to approach magic. That's how you transform your magical practice into something where you're just doing it, into something where you are it. And it becomes who and what you are each and every day. And that's where you get rid of all the academic considerations and everything else, because you don't care about that stuff. You don't need to debate what a term is or anything like that. Instead, you're just doing the work, being the work, and allowing it to transform you. You become the work, and the results come to you. And it's as simple as that. So, there we are. Another fun evening with me. Thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Gail. Yeah, Gail, real quick, you said, that's great. That's a great example. Like exactly what you're talking about is exactly what you want to be doing. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week, if not sooner.